All right, everybody. This is the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. Boy, I have a terrible radio voice when I try to do that. Your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey. I am your host. Thank you all very, very much for being here. Live after the fact. I can't be live. I'm confusing my intros and outros. Thank you for listening, everybody. As you can tell, I don't really edit these things, so if I sound like a moron, you know what? Not the first, won't be the last. However you have arrived at listening to this show, be that Apple Music, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, the 411mania.com website, however you do it, thank you very much. If you could take just a little bit of time, and I do mean very little because this shouldn't be complicated. If you're listening on a apparatus that allows star ratings, give us a star review, whatever you think we deserve. Again, if you think this is, a 1-star show, fine, I'll take it. 1 star. Just give us a little bit of a review. Thumbs up or thumbs down, and I'm just going to ask for thumbs up if you're on YouTube because A, everybody does it, and B, this is not the worst thing you're going to find on YouTube, let's be honest.
1 star is better than none.
It is very much true. So if you could interact with this just a little bit, however you can, it helps out with, again, analytics and the algorithms and so on and so forth. So thank you very much if at all possible. Thanks for sharing us. If you have a friend, point them at our show if you think they'd be interested. If you have an enemy, point them at our show if you think they'd be interested, and I will annoy them. All right, on the docket this evening, last night, UFC was in Tampa, Florida for UFC on ESPN Plus 19, a card that had... Oh, God. There were 14 fights last night. This was the second longest event in terms of in-cage time, behind only Verdum versus Tabora from a couple of years ago. I think the final in-cage fight time for this event clocked in at like 2 hours, 57 minutes and change. The Verdum Tabora one is over 3 hours. And I remember that event because the broadcast time on FS1 for that monstrosity from start to finish was over 7 hours.
There was only one fight that ended in a stoppage on the main card, but the whole card was on ESPN Plus.
Yeah, for this one, yes.
5 decisions on the main card, 3 on the prelims.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I don't know why they went with 14 fights. That seems unbelievably excessive.
I don't think they should go more than 10 fights, in my opinion, but, got all these guys on the roster and fights and got to get paid.
And they already run one event a week, basically. So.
But the show, apparently they still drew over 10,500 people. I don't know how many actual paid, but, they had a decent attendance for Tampa.
Yeah. We'll also be previewing UFC on ESPN 6. That's coming up this next Friday. So just be aware it's Friday, not Saturday. And that's got a decent main event. It's not the worst card in the world.
Oh.
Also, whatever news came out this week, not a whole lot. You've heard Jeff already a little bit, but he's with me again, as usual, my partner in crime, Jeff Harris. How are things going over there, Jeff?
If everyone could root for the Astros, which I have on in the background right now, I'd really appreciate it. We're down 0-1 against the Yankees in the ALCS, so if you hate the Yankees, I'll take it.
I have no dog in the hunt, but for whatever it's worth, you can count me rooting for them for the duration of the podcast, I guess.
Well, thank you for that, at least. Well, let's get to it.
All right. We're going to start with a bit of an odd thing here, because prior to actually getting into the fights from last night, from UFC on ESPN Plus 19, we have to talk a little bit about news that broke after we went off the air last week. Last week, we record Sunday evenings, for the most part, and the next day or so was when this story started percolating. Apparently, former strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk, or her team, I say her, this is not her necessarily specifically, but her team, someone in that area, in that camp, told the UFC that they didn't think she was going to be able to make weight for the Tampa card. Now, This was this is not fighters do this on occasion. They tend to have a feel for when they're going to miss weight or not. And occasionally they're able to give the UFC a heads up to try and smooth out negotiations about catchweight affairs, something along those lines. I don't know. So that happened. It's also kind of been intimated. I mean, look, nutrition as a nutritionist is a kind of a bro science field. There's not a lot of settled science. There's a bunch of people who argue different things, and again, there is certainly scientific merit within it, but it's not settled, and you get a lot of bizarreness. But apparently, she fired her nutritionist ahead of this. Partway through this weight cut, and spent time at the Performance Institute trying to undo the damage, which might have been part of the reason she said, we're not sure we're going to make weight. And it's not uncommon for fighters to miss weight. Michelle Waterson responded to this by saying that she would not accept a catch-weight fight.
Which is within her right.
Absolutely. And again, I kind of say good for her, you know?
UFC President Dana White said it was head games, but I mean, it's Dana White.
I think Dana White is full of crap in this instance.
Well, here's what he said. Yesterday, my partner ESPN put up their ticker tape. Joanna Jędrzejczyk didn't make weight. The weigh-ins are today, Friday. It's been crazy. What has been happening, there has been some head games going on between two veterans who are fighting in the main event of a fight that is very important in both their careers, and to see who gets the next title shot, that's literally what is going on. And all of these MMA suckers fall for it because they're hearing things behind the scenes or whatever is going on. None of it is true. Here's what else he said. He denied that he was going to pay fines for Joanna. I don't know what that's about. Did someone say the UFC was going to pay Joanna's fines if she didn't make weight?
I have not heard that one.
That he said, then I saw a story that said we were going to pay her fines if she didn't make weight. This is what he told TMZ. That will never happen. I'm never paying fines for people who didn't make weight. That's a lie. That's never going to happen ever. Well,
I imagine it has happened and will happen in the future, but it was probably untrue in this situation.
Dana White did once say he was never going to put Amanda Nunes in a UFC main event again. Didn't he say that once?
He said a lot of things.
And he also said he was never going to book John Jones in a pay-per-view main event again just because of all of his indiscretions.
Yep, also things that Dana White has said.
You know, I'm just saying, never is a long time, so maybe, like, don't box yourself in by saying never.
Yeah, again, I would be sure.
A soundbite headline. You never know.
Yeah. Again, there were some of this was some of this was, I hate to say, mischaracterized, but the people reporting that Joanna missed weight were completely inaccurate. Those reports were kind of really breaking on Thursday. The weigh-ins aren't until Friday. She hadn't missed weight.
I think what the concern was that she was worried she wouldn't make weight.
Yeah, again, that particular issue she had brought to light to the UFC about a week before. A couple of fighters have confirmed that they were approached by the UFC about filling in. I know Angela Hill mentioned that she had.
And that's good planning. But I think there is a sense that this story did get blown out of proportion to some degree.
They're certainly trying to spin it that way.
I think it did.
I mean, again, if you go to the UFC and say a week out and say, I'm not going to make weight. And again, look, Joanna officially made weight. She weighed 115.5. She made weight.
Maybe she was worried, and it just in her weight cut, she saw something in her weight cut that she was a little worried, and she was being. Sometimes we're overly cautious, and things turn out all right anyway.
I also would not put it past the situation for it to have been she just kind of wanted a greater competitive advantage. Hey, can we do a catch weight? Can we do a catch weight instead of the official weight?
I'm concerned because weight cutting is dangerous, and we know it is at this point. And I don't want to see like what happened with Darren Till, where he got so sick while cutting weight, he went temporarily blind, and that's from the video he and his own camp released online Okay, that's fact. And then that infamous video of Cyborg just looking on near. Remember that video where he looked near death during a weight cut to, I think, 140 pounds, or was it 145?
That would have been 140.
Yeah, when she was doing a catch weight of 140. That looked horrible. And Joanna has never missed weight before, but she has talked about her struggles making weight in the past. And so I'm just concerned in general when when a fighter comes out, when a fighter's camp comes out, whatever, says something like this, I don't want them getting hurt, and I don't want them risking their life to make weight. Now, ultimately, I don't know what really went on here. None of us do. But she came out, she made weight. She didn't have trouble making weight for this fight. She came in she came in at 115.5. So I don't know what happened here. I hope she didn't. My hope is that she didn't go through any extreme measures to make weight. That's my hope, and I really hope anything like that didn't happen. But you never know.
If I were to hazard a guess, let me be clear, this is me speculating. Some part of her weight cut got a little bit screwed up, and she was exploring avenues for avoiding having to correct it. So, hey, if we can again, this is, hey, can we do a catch weight instead of the agreed upon weight bout? And if Michelle Waterson agrees, then fair play. We both weigh, 120 instead of 115, and the fight goes ahead as scheduled.
And that's not unprecedented. That's happened many times in the past.
Oh, yeah, that does happen. In all honesty, I think more fighters exploring the option of, kind of catch weights under those circumstances is something that should happen more in the sport. Right. If you're a week out and your weight cut is gone, or 2 weeks out and things are not going well, at least ask. Like, at that point, don't just say, hey, I'm not going to make weight.
It's last minute. Waterson agreed to 115 pounds. This is their job. She's naturally the smaller fighter. Joanna is naturally bigger. And you can argue that Waterson is naturally a 105.
She is.
Yeah. So it wasn't unreasonable for her to be adamant about accepting the fight at 115 or bust. So I don't disagree with her there.
I have no problem with her saying, no, I will not accept a catchweight fight in this scenario. I mean,
it didn't look, once push came to shove, it didn't look like Joanna was having problems. So she could have just been paranoid about the weight cut.
Or just kind of gotten into the last week or so and went, boy, this really sucks. If I can avoid it, I'd like to.
But look, we've seen fighters have bad weight cuts and look like garbage. And this was really not one of those times, Robert. I don't think.
Her performance didn't suffer the same way we've seen other people who have just catastrophic weight cuts suffer.
Misha Tate.
Misha frequently. Kevin Lee would frequently have those kinds of issues. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of examples.
At the same time, I don't think there's anything with scrutinizing this situation a lot more. Looking into both this situation more and also keeping an eye on Joanna in the future and see if this comes up again. There's nothing really happened here and nothing sketchy really happened that we know of, but I just think we should keep a close eye on it because, again, weight cutting is dangerous, and I think this is something we should be scrutinizing right now.
Yeah, especially if she does, and we'll get into the fight specifically, because she did win the fight.
Yeah.
And is in all likelihood the next contender to the strawweight title that she used to hold. And if she has to hit 115 straight up instead of getting that extra pound allowance, it does bear watching.
I thought it was a good fight, not an outstanding fight. Waterson did good. She had her moments. Almost got Joanna's back and was almost able to get a choke in at one point. Her grappling was on point. It was really the striking that made a difference. But, I mean, Waterson held her own. He just wasn't able to overcome the elite striking game of Joanna, who's probably the best striker in that division, probably the best kickboxer. Unless you disagree.
No, not especially. I mean, again, she's been outstruck. That's essentially entirely how Rose Namajunas beat her both times.
But I mean, before that fight, would you have said Rose was a better striker, kickboxer than Joanna?
No.
Matchup.
And I think I'm
not saying what happened with Rose was an anomaly. I mean,
no. I'm now trying to visualize how those two would match up if they were just straight kickboxing instead of
just matchups. You know, it's
unpredictable. Yeah, Rose did a bunch of things that just completely were undoing to the fundamentals of Joanna's game.
And Watterson did some damage here. I mean, she got some hits in, and I think Joanna's foot got really jacked up.
Ooh, yeah. Have you seen the pictures of that from today?
Not the ones from today, but last night.
Yeah. No, it got much worse. Like, look it up if you get a sec.
I kind of want to see it now.
It's pretty gnarly. Again, the official result, Joanna Jędrzejczyk defeats Michelle Watterson unanimous decision, 50-45 twice and 49-46.
Sometimes, like, the swelling doesn't even happen that day. It takes, like, but, that is gnarly.
Yeah, that's a badly broken. I hate to say badly. That is a broken foot.
It looks like a balloon it looks like a foot-shaped balloon.
A little bit, yeah.
Poor Joanna. Get well soon.
You throw that many kicks, a few of them get checked. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Again, the fight itself was not a bad fight, but Michelle Watterson doesn't really have the same type of style that troubles Joanna. I know a lot of the talking heads and some of the commentary going into this was, well,
looked like a little badass last night, though. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, she took everything Joanna gave her.
Yeah, she took a beating.
And she didn't get tired. Both these women have probably better cardio than most men.
I imagine that's probably true.
Amazing gas tanks. It's just, Joanna was just more dominant, got more significant strikes. And her grappling and submission defense held up as well.
Yeah, one of the key.
I don't think anyone's ever really been able to submit. No one's ever submitted Joanna.
Nope. One of the keys to beating Joanna is there's a couple of things. One is don't be the aggressive party. Joanna really wants you to come at her. That's what a lot of her game is predicated on. I mean, again, commentary was making her off to be. No, how is Michelle going to deal with the forward pressure of Joanna? Joanna's not a terribly forward first fighter. She excels much more countering your aggression.
I remember in some of her title defenses, she would even drop the first round. Maybe even the first two rounds. 2 rounds, as I recall.
I only recall that arguably happening in the Gedalia fight.
I think it happened in the Letourneau fight, too. I would say she lost the first round of that fight.
The first round I think the first was the only one you could arguably give Letourneau. That's true. But anyway, you kind of have to make her come to you because she's not as comfortable in that role. And you can't really bite on her shadow boxing.
Carolina won a round in that fight.
Yeah, she caught her that was the 3rd or 4th. She caught her with that counterpunch that dropped her.
Well, I mean, I just feel like both in Letourneau and Gedalia, excuse me, her opponents were the aggressors in those early rounds. That's the way I saw it. But I agree with you. I largely agree with you.
And especially once she gets a feel for your rhythm and the distance that the fight is contested at, that's when she really starts upping her output, and she's good about kind of picking at you at distance. Again, the reason that Rose just kind of undid her fundamentally was she didn't bite on any of the fakes or feints. She didn't engage with Joanna at really long distance. She would wait for Joanna to throw something from out of range, bounce in, counter, bounce back out, and just repeated that over and over. And Joanna had no real answer. And the Shevchenko fight, something very similar. It is hilarious to me rewatching parts of that fight. Joanna's corner tells her, like, between every round, the fakes and feints are working. She's not, her head's going to be straight up in the air when you go, which is profoundly inaccurate because there's no reason to react to anything that's not going to hit you. And both Rose and Valentina were able to get a feel for the range much faster than Joanna. So every time she was throwing stuff, or the whole purpose of a feint is to draw out a reaction. If you're feinting from out of range, there's no reason to react, so it doesn't actually give you any information.
What did you think of that moment where she got her back and tried to attempt a rear naked choke?
The choke was never all that close, but Waterson's back taking is very, very fast. That's not just here.
He's a very high level grappler, I think.
Again, she's got almost all of her opponent's backs, I think, in most of her recent fights. I know because she choked out Paige Van Zandt from there. She got Carolina's back a couple of times. She got Herrig's back. She's good at forcing that scramble and then finding her way to your back very quickly and getting hooks in and actually kind of securing the position.
Now, it may seem unlikely, but Meltzer talked about it on Observer Radio. Do you think the UFC ever not that they're going to do this? Do you think it's possible the UFC will ever start a atomweight 105 for the women?
Ever? Probably. In the near future, I struggle to see that.
Okay.
I mean, they should have added atomweight before they added featherweight. There's more women fighting at atomweight than there are at featherweight.
Well, they needed featherweight for Cyborg, and then they even have the first fight with her.
Yeah, God, their mismanagement of that situation aside. Without getting into the weeds on that, 105, I think, could be a valuable addition. There's a few women fighting in the UFC at strawweight that would immediately make that drop.
But I think if you, besides the women who can, you need to bring in a lot more, decent fighters who can fight at women's 105, I think.
Yeah, you would have to raid. I hate to say raid because that's not necessarily the right word, but they'd take a bunch from Invicta. They'd have to try and lure a few away from places like One or Ryzen that have more established divisions like that. I mean, there's a few women who came into strawweight and then wound up leaving that might come back for 105.
I mean, there are probably some strawweights who could drop down, but we don't want to thin out strawweight either.
Again, is it possible? Yeah, and at some point they will, but I don't know how soon. I mean, they just got burned pretty badly by featherweight, so they're and women's flyweight is not exactly flourishing at the moment.
So this fight has likely earned Joanna another title shot. It's not official, but the next fight will likely be Joanna versus Zhang for the women's strawweight belt. I think that's a great, interesting fight. How do you like that matchup?
It's the one to make. I mean, the only other contender right now would be Tatiana Suarez, and Suarez is barely back to sparring after her most recent injury. So yeah,
you do that fight in China in a stadium.
I mean, they could, but I'm not sure they would.
Because they did the Australia fight in a stadium, and it did very well.
Yeah.
It looked great.
You also had the benefit of two regional stars and, not being in China. There's certain places in China they're not going to...
UFC has already been to China multiple times at this point, and they've done...
They have. They've done okay there.
They're in China, right?
Hmm?
So, I mean, I feel like it wouldn't be as hard to do it as you think.
Again, there are certain logistical concerns.
Right now, there's a lot of right now there is a lot of not anti-Chinese, but Chinese government, Chinese regime going on.
You know, considering they're a murderous regime, rounding up people and putting them in concentration camps, executing them and harvesting their organs, yeah, I think there should be.
I mean, I don't disagree with that, but so that could, you know, if UFC were to do business in China like that, it could be.
I mean, they're already going to face, assuming media actually does their job, they should be facing elements of at least questions about that going forward.
But I mean, who isn't in business? Who isn't in bed with China at this point? If you're a big corporation,
it's true. It's a real concern, and you know, much as I would prefer that all the businesses in question do the moral thing, because it's pretty easy to say, hey, what the Chinese government is doing is immoral and evil, and they should be condemned in the strongest possible language for it.
You know, probably half the junk in my house was made in China. So, I mean, it's not like I'm some saint here. I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint.
And look, again, I am not defending this position, but I am going to mention that if you're a company that spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars trying to establish a presence in China, you know, you would probably be throwing all of that. I'd say throwing all of it away as though the, you know, terrible things that government has been doing for. I don't know why we're just now kind of coming around to this. That the Chinese government spent
I don't want to have a moral debate about the governments, but look, it's a thing right now. That being said, they have a Chinese champion.
Yep.
And there could be an opportunity for them to make something like that happen. It's not the most I don't think it's the most outrageous idea in the world to discuss.
No, and some of it's going to be time related because right. I mean, look, the UFC is. I'm not going to pretend the UFC is a moral institution. If the heat dies down, they'll do it.
But look, Joanna has to heal up from this. Probably want a little time off, but Zhang now has a work visa. According to Meltzer, on the Wrestling Observer Radio, she has a work visa now. So the fight could happen in the U.S. too. It sounds like. We'll see.
Yeah, it's the fight to make. As far as the matchup itself goes, it's a compelling one. I mean, Zhang's first.
I'm happy that Mike Brown is continuing to take such an active role in training, you know, fighters of today, and seeing him still have a presence in the sport, even though, you know, he didn't have the greatest run in the UFC. I have a lot of respect, and I'm a big fan of Mike Brown, so good for him.
That man is a sadly forgotten great in terms of his in-cage career.
Right. I agree. He was legit the best 145er in the world at one point.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, he was.
He was the champion. That's not always the same thing.
Champion. He beat the guy, the hot name twice, Uriah Faber.
Yep.
And then he just ran into the surging up and coming Jose Aldo, and that was pretty much the end of his run.
Didn't he beat Leonard Garcia too?
Yeah, when Leonard Garcia, you know.
I mean, sure, it's Leonard Garcia. No one cares, but I thought there was because we all remember the Faber fights, but I was pretty sure he beat Leonard Garcia too.
First he defended against Garcia, then the rematch with Faber, and then he lost to Aldo.
Yeah.
He had a little run. I mean, he was treated undeservedly treated like an underdog against Faber.
God, that was
Faber
so sad.
The media darling, and he beat and dominated Faber twice. So I mean, good for him. But I'm happy he's he's still in the sport and he's still training and coaching fighters like Joanna. It makes me very happy to see that.
Yeah, the fight between Joanna and Zhang in theory is it's an interesting one because I mean Zhang spent her first 2 UFC fights doing nothing but circling away and landing leg kicks.
As you said, Brown is a forgotten great, and if he's a good coach, I like the fact that he's coaching other high-level fighters.
If he wasn't a good, I think he's been at American Top Team at this point long enough that if he wasn't good at his job, they would have fired him.
Right.
So yeah, it is. Mike Brown's turned into a really darn good coach. I mean, I haven't heard too many people complain about him. So anyway, that was your main event. Again, good fight. I'm not complaining about pretty much anything related to it.
Co-main event and then quick hits.
Yeah, I think so. All right, co-main event. This was your fight of the night officially. Cub Swanson defeats Kron Gracie via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Kron Gracie has since come out and tried to invoke Diaz logic of I didn't lose, I just ran out of time. No, buddy, you lost.
I mean, he did well, I think, but he still lost. He's dominating.
This is an odd fight to kind of parse because, first of all, credit to Kron's resilience because he ate some hellacious body shots and just did not care at all.
He was in there with a longtime veteran. Yeah.
This fight serves. This is going to sound like I'm insulting both guys, and I'm not trying to.
Mm-hmm.
This fight serves as two things. One, if you watch Kron Gracie's performance. I'm going to paraphrase someone else. I believe it's Luke Thomas. I saw say this and I agreed with it. Kron's striking isn't necessarily green because that would imply he's adopted some best practices that just need time to mature. Kron Gracie's striking eschews the majority of what striking in MMA looks like. And whether that's by design, whether that's him kind of, I don't know specifically, but it's not good. And the fact that he was as successful
of his career.
Well, sure, but
he's not really a striker. He's a grappler. He's a BJJ grappler.
Sure, but even in other guys making that transition, you can see the foundations of what striking, I hate to say, is supposed to look like, but currently accepted best practices have a certain look. And he does not have even the basics of that.
I'm a huge Swanson fan, and I think he did a lot of sloppy stuff last night.
You did. Again, my big takeaway from this is, again, twofold. One, Kron Gracie just doesn't really have even the kind of fundamentals of what contemporary MMA striking looks like. And two, the fact that he was as successful as he was against Cub Swanson should just remind us all about how close to the end Cub Swanson is.
Well, 35 years old, coming off 4 back-to-back losses here. So,
and look, I'm not knocking Cub, man. Again, you're over 30. He's had 40 fights.
He probably has a lot less fights than what obviously he has less fights than what he's put in.
Yeah, he's very near kind of the end. At least at a minimum, he's near the end of a UFC.
Because he did all things being equal. He did quite a bit of damage to Cub here, and he was able to hit him quite a bit.
Yep. There's a lot of, especially Cubs, like exiting the pocket that left him wide open to anyone with a decent hook or a head kick that would have cleaned his clock.
Look, Cub can be a little wild sometimes. That's not new, but he was very wild, and I think left a lot of openings last night.
Yeah,
I really saw that from him when he was having like that 6-0 run.
You still saw moments of that same kind of stuff from him then too.
Yeah, but I think he would be. I thought he was more dynamic, and he used a lot better angles. I think it's starting to clearly degrade a little bit now, though.
Yeah, fighting the way he does becomes a greater liability the longer you do it.
Right.
And he's just at the point when, again, he was on a 4-fight losing streak, and okay, some of that was high-level opposition. Okay,
right.
He was doing, he did a lot of great work against Brian Ortega before nearly getting submitted in the first, and then actually submitted in the second.
But the fight with Ortega is still almost 2 years old at this point.
Yeah,
then he's 2 years older now. He's 35 now, and all that takes its toll. Age takes a toll. He's probably not in his fighting prime anymore either.
I mean, he's had 37 professional mixed martial arts fights. He's 35. A lot of those have been, kind of knockdown, drag out affair. I mean, his fight with Doo Ho Choi, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
That was a war. Both the Edgar fights, he took a beating. He
went 5 rounds with Artem Lobov.
That fight sucked.
That's my point. He's going 5 rounds with a guy like Lobov.
Yeah. And again, he's just very near the end of his career at this point. And this fight, while a much needed win for him, also serves to illustrate that point to someone like me, I suppose.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. I'm not trying to run down Cub. I'm a big fan. I enjoy watching him fight. It's just the reality.
Again, I've had a lot of enjoyment watching Cub Swanson over the years. I picked him to beat Frankie Edgar in their first fight.
Because he kind of, he went the distance with a 5-0 fighter who's not a very good striker.
And was hit a fair bit. Anyway, as for the rest of this card.
Nico Price.
Oh,
the year. I don't care.
For me, this is probably second place for knockout of the year.
Second place is still high.
It is, yeah. This will wind up, I think, being second or third.
I'm sorry, James Vick, but that was seeing you get up kicked to sleep.
Yeah, Nico Price knocks out James Vick with an up kick 1:44 seconds into the first round. This one sounded bad. Like, if you just heard this sounds like a coconut dropping onto a floor. Like, this was oof. On the plus side for James Vick.
You got to protect yourself at all times,
Yeah. On the plus side for James Vick, a few people posted some health updates for him this morning. His CT scan was clear. He has no broken or even or displaced teeth. He credits his gum shield for that. His jaw's not broken. One of the knee that he kind of fell on might have a serious injury, but they're going to have to wait on a MRI. The x-ray was inconclusive.
I mean, as a fellow Texan, I'm glad he's okay. Damn that visual.
Yeah, this was a bad one, guys. He was out on his knees. This was a bad knockout. I think his chin is just shot. Doesn't matter what weight class he fights at.
Is it correct? So the last UFC upkick knockout was in 2006. Is that accurate?
Yes, that was the only other upkick finish in the UFC when John Fitch basically TKO'd Thiago Alves with it back in the day.
Now, in terms of high-level MMA, there was the Gegard Mousasi versus Jacare.
Most famously, yes.
Was that in Sengoku in Japan?
It was Sengoku or Dream, one of those two.
Yeah, it was one of those two. It wasn't, it was post-Pride Japanese promotion that I think is now defunct. There was that.
Let me look that up.
I feel like
that was Dream 6. That was in 2008.
So I feel like there have been. I feel like Mousasi almost got King Mo once, but King Mo still won the fight.
He caught him a few times. He never finished him with it.
Right. I mean, upkicks they're an effective technique, but you almost never see someone getting just slept with a straight upkick. So,
yeah, I think the only other one, and this is not a UFC fight necessarily, but Tony Ferguson knocked out that little Randy Couture lookalike on his season of Tough with an upkick. Okay.
So that's
but yeah,
kind of but Ultimate Fighter. So
yeah, you don't really see them at the elite level.
Right.
It is a rarity. Watch lower level stuff; they happen more frequently.
You don't always see guys throwing the upkicks, because you do have to be careful. Because if a guy's diving for the guard, and if he's on his knees, that can be a foul. And usually, fighters are good at defending upkicks. Or watching out for them.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to mitigate that danger, and I mean, Crone was had a really nice setup for them, actually, when he was fighting Swanson. He would get close, he would try to pull guard, and then if that failed, he'd reach down, and there's a sweep you do by, I think it's called the Kuro Kuro sweep, forgive me if I'm incorrect about this, where you just kind of grab around the backs of their ankles and you push with your feet on them, and you will tip them backwards. He would kind of do something like that, and one of the ways to defend against that winds up leaving your head a little more exposed, and he would then go back, so he would pull guard, set for that sweep, and then when Cub defended, fire an up kick. And he never caught him flush with it, but it was a really interesting kind of sequence he was pulling off there. I'm gonna have to rewatch that one and see how that, you can look at some of the more specifics of that one.
Interesting.
So again, not a bad one. All right, next up, Amanda Hebos defeated Mackenzie Dern via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. This fight sucked. Matt Frivola defeated Luis Pena via split decision, 129-28 for Pena, 229-28 for Frivola. I scored this for Pena, but the entire scoring of this comes down to the first round, and kind of a meh round. Could go either way.
I agree with your scoring on Pena, but, it was a close fight.
Eric Anders defeated Gerald Mershart via split decision. I also disagreed with this one. These 29-28s again, 2 for Anders, 1 for Mershart. I thought Mershart won this fight. Not a whole lot here. The fact that Eric Anders basically got outstruck by Gerald Mershart is... Anders had some hype and clearly has some athletic ability, but if he's not able to get everything together at some point in the near future, does not seem like he has not a good thing.
He's so inconsistent, Yeah.
All right, as for the prelims, Ryan Spann defeated Devin Clark with a guillotine choke 2 minutes and 1 second into the second round. Mediocre fight, decent enough finish from Spann. Mike Davis and Thomas Gifford. Oh, God, I got to talk about this. Okay, Mike Davis officially knocks out Thomas Gifford with punches 4:45 of the third round. Okay. I had the first round of this fight as a 10-7 for Mike Davis. Just because Gifford did nothing. And if we were under the old score set, I don't think I could have gone to a 10-7, but under the new ones, I think it was appropriate. That said, I wasn't screaming at the ref to end this fight because the big kind of flourish final sequence that would have prompted a stoppage came right at the end of the round. If it goes on for another 4 seconds, I think that fight is stopped. But timing's a thing. Gifford comes out for the second round and drops, in my estimation, a 10-8. He was a heavy bag, man. He had nothing. Between rounds 2 and 3, this fight should have been stopped. His corners should have stopped it. There were a few moments in that second round when the ref should have stopped it. Just give him this, just stop it. There's no point to this. So we come out for the third round, just a fight that should not be going on. And Gifford continues to absorb head trauma for another 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Michael Bisping on commentary, just actively being disgusted by this. There's a few different points. Davis cracks him with a left hook and he wobbles on the feet. And at that point, okay, he doesn't fall. I don't care. Look at what's happened. If he's not fighting back, and he's not, you can stop the fight. Somebody doesn't have to go down. They really don't. I don't know why we have this ridiculous mentality in the sport that it tends to just dissuade standing TKOs. You cannot be defending yourself and still upright. That's a thing. It happens in boxing all the time. Kickboxing too. But it wasn't, and then Davis finally lands a right. He face plants. Michael Bisping has to restrain himself from swearing on air. And he just actually says, this got cut out of the clip because of some of the time delay, but Gifford face plants, and Michael Bisping's actually says, stop he goes to say, oh, Jesus, but he stops himself at G's. The ref finally stops it, and his actual line from commentary is, are you happy now, ref? This was an absolute catastrophic failure of cornering, failure of officiating. This is every bit as bad, if not arguably worse, than the Gavin Tucker, Rick Glenn scenario from a couple of years ago. Shame on Gifford's corner, which apparently includes his father. Shame on this ref, who was pulled from all other officiating duties for the rest of the night after this abomination. Just, again, this is a categorical failure of all these people. They're just not doing what they're supposed to do on a fundamental level. This was disgusting to watch in that respect. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Instances like this, that kind of failure, that is how people die in combat sports. Heck, there was that guy, I think it was Georgian, the country. There was some like Russian Slavic guy a couple of months ago whose corner, after a couple of rounds, made the hard call, stopped the fight on behalf of his fighter. His fighter still had just suffered too much head trauma and died a few weeks later from it. This is how this happens. Hope you're all proud of yourselves. Bunch of slack-jawed jackasses. Moving on. Alex Morono defeats Max Griffin.
Ventura. Nothing.
Okay. Oh, slack-jawed. I get it. I will not, however, be encouraging you all to have chew and accuse you of being of a different sexual orientation, should you decline. Alex Morono defeats Max Griffin via unanimous decision, 29-28 twice, 129-27. The 10-8's dubious. Morono won the fight. He got a near, I think it was the second that they gave him 10-8, which I'm okay with. He dropped Griffin with a head kick, dropped him again. Like, it was near the end of the round, so yeah, I can see it. This entire card had 4 ranked fighters on it. Two of them, and there were 2 fights with ranked contenders fighting each other. One of them was the main event. The other, this one, buried on the prelims because the UFC hates flyweights. Deiveson Figueiredo defeated Tim Elliott via guillotine choke 3 minutes and 8 seconds into the first round. Figueiredo must have had a heck of a grip going because he did not really have the other, like one side of Elliott's neck was open. So whatever kind of choke he had, it was a windpipe compression rather than a blood choke, which can still get someone to tap. I mean, Tim Elliott's not an easy guy to finish, and Figueiredo did it. Figueiredo held the choke a little bit too long. I don't like that. He was apologetic afterwards, but you should know better, buddy. After the fight, Figueiredo said, Joseph Benavidez, let's fight for the vacant belt or the interim belt or what have you, because Henry Cejudo is not going to be ready to fight until early next year and might not even be fighting at flyweight anyway, so that's a little bit up in the air. I know what the UFC has said, but I cannot take Dana White at face value, and neither should you. Figueiredo and Benavidez is a good fight. You know, Figueiredo's an exciting flyweight, as are most flyweights, actually. Marlon Vera defeated Andre Ewell via TKO, just elbows and punches in the third round. Vera's a solid fighter. I mean, Ewell had his moments in this fight, but Vera's just kind of better everywhere. And once he got on top, especially, just unloaded on him. Miguel Baeza defeated Hector Aldana via TKO leg kicks and elbows, 2 minutes 32 into the second round. That calf kick, guys, it's a killer. Baeza kept landing it on Aldana. Finally dropped him. He dropped him with it a few times. In the second round, he did not get up immediately. Baeza got on top of him. Most of the elbows he was landing were blocked, but Aldana wasn't doing anything else. His hips weren't moving. His legs weren't engaged. He was just done. Hector Aldana, I feel pretty confident now saying not a UFC caliber fighter. I believe he's 0-3 in the promotion. Marvin Vettori defeated Andrew Sanchez via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Wound up being much more of a showcase for Vettori than I thought it was going to be. I picked him to win because I've never been sold on Andrew Sanchez. But he really was just clearly the better fighter of these two. So good for Vettori. And kicking everything off, J.J. Aldrich defeated Lauren Mueller via unanimous decision, 30-27 and then to 29-28. Not a bad fight, all things considered. Both of those women do a lot of headhunting and would benefit from body work. Especially since, if you don't have a tremendous amount of knockout power, incorporate body work. It's easier to accumulate body damage with lesser force than it is to knock someone out with one punch if you don't just have that power. All right. Jeff, what do you got to say here for the rest of these fights? Because there were some pretty good ones in there.
You covered it.
Alrighty. Again, thanks to anyone who read my coverage at 411 Mania or has read the report after the fact. I deeply, deeply appreciate the support that you guys give me. I keep trying to get better, so at any point, if you guys have constructive criticism, I am open to it. I mean, I'd rather you not just tell me to eat feces and perish, but I can't stop you if that's all you want to do. Again, not a bad night of fights, actually. Again, there were some kind of mass stuff, some just catastrophic failures, but good top cup. The top three fights all delivered to one degree or another. Again, solid night of fights, even if it was about 3 fights too long in terms of just 14 fights on a card. Ugh, just don't do that again, please. That's just a lot. All right, moving on. UFC on ESPN 6, Friday, October 18th, from the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Your main event, Jeff. Chris Weidman, trying to revitalize his career, moving up to light heavyweight to fight the undefeated Dominic Reyes.
I like the matchup. I don't think it's going to be a good night for Weidman, though.
Yeah, Weidman just 1-4 in his last 5. Good grief. Knocked out by Rockhold, knocked out by Romero, knocked out by Mousasi, submits Kelvin Gastelum, but he got dropped badly at the end of that first round, and knocked out by Jacare. So, again, what do you see being kind of the big thing here as far as why you're going with Reyes? Is it just Weidman being washed?
Well, I don't think Weidman's looked really good in a while. He's moving up to a new weight class. He's fighting an undefeated light heavyweight. Weidman's not used to fighting this type of opponent. And Reyes is a legit prospect, man. And he's done very well. I mean, he beat Volkan Oezdemir, who fought for the title. I just don't think this is a fight where Weidman's just going to walk in and have an easy go of it. And I just kind of feel like we've seen the ceiling for Weidman. And I don't know. I don't really feel like he's shown enough to prove he's going to, moving up a weight class is going to fix his chin or just the problems he's had in the past. I don't think he's going to regain anything by moving up in weight.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn in some respects because even over this string of losses, Weidman has shown some moments of really good stuff. The whole first round against Jacare, he did a great job of keeping his jab going, of moving laterally, of frustrating and tagging Jacare, and then it just couldn't quite maintain it. Jacare made a few adjustments to be able to get in closer, and we got the firefight that we got.
The other thing, Weidman tends to get into a lot of firefights, and he tends to sort of just wade in and just leave his head and chin wide open.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Reyes here. Some of this is dependent on Weidman's game plan, and I'm making an assumption or two about that.
He tends to be aggressive and tries to just lumberjack his way in.
Yeah, if Weidman comes out with a very wrestling-heavy offense, I'll be very curious to see how Reyes deals with that because Weidman is such a good grappler. But the longer this stays on the feet, especially at kind of distance, Reyes is a big guy and a long guy for that. Even at light heavyweight, Reyes is 6 something or other? Yeah, he's 6'4".
4.
And has he's got less than 80 inches of reach though. I mean 77, so I shouldn't be overly critical of that. Yeah, Weidman actually has longer arms. Weidman has a longer reach. Reyes, again, much more known for his kicking. His kicking game is, I won't say very sophisticated, but it is extremely effective.
Weidman's not a small man, and, middleweight was always sort of a big cut for him. But I don't know. I'm not sure he's naturally fit for light heavyweight.
And even if he is, this feels like kind of a big ask for his debut, Yeah, I'm gonna lean Reyes, but I'm not gonna be terribly surprised if Weidman finds something that he can exploit in Reyes' habits.
I mean, we'll see, but I'm leaning toward Reyes in this fight.
All right, as for your co-main event, this was the original. It actually was the main event from a event a couple of weeks ago. Rebooked after the no contest, Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stephens. I kind of want Stephens to come out and just do the old Three Stooges double poke to the eye, just like first thing he does. Just come out, bonk. How do you like it? He'd be disqualified for that, but I would laugh. I would laugh so hard.
Before anyone criticizes Jeremy Stephens, just remember, Michael Bisping lost his whole entire eyeball. So, luckily Stephens is okay, but an eye poke is not like a simple little walk it off type of foul. I'm sorry.
No, look, the people who were throwing shade at Jeremy Stephens were talking out of their ass. No, sorry guys. The notion that he was malingering or didn't want to fight or some such nonsense. I mean, he spent something like, they said the number, I want to say it was like $30,000 on his training camp. He spent like 6 weeks or months, 3 months, I think it was, down in Mexico prepping for that fight. No, he's not going to throw that kind of cash and spend that kind of time to then just, 15 seconds and a minor bit of adversity. He's not Bob Sapp, okay? Again, that was a ridiculous claim. This now being a 3-round instead of a 5-round fight does kind of tilt a few things in Rodriguez's favor, I think.
I'm still favoring Stephens.
I'm still favoring Stephens, but I think Yair's odds in a 3-round fight are better than they were in a 5-round fight.
Probably.
In a heavyweight fight, because ESPN really does love them some football players in MMA, Greg Hardy.
Greg Hardy's back.
This is not a joke about Greg Hardy. Okay? I mean, look, I've said all I'm going to say about him as a person. His debut was on the first ever UFC on ESPN Plus card, was promoted. His second fight was on the main card for Hermanson versus Jacare. And now he's, again, heavily, and the one after that was on ESPN, the Edwards versus Dos Santos fight, ESPN 4. And he was not the co-main, but the one right after that.
I have a question. Why is Greg Hardy such a big deal, other than that he's a former NFL player? Is he a good NFL player?
Most of this is due to the domestic abuse allegations and a few convictions that have been thrown his way.
I mean, I see Pro Bowl, I see second team All-Pro, first team All. I don't see a Super Bowl ring in here.
Well, he played for the Cowboys, of course not.
I'm just like, what? I other than that, he was in the NFL. I don't get why he gets such a big push.
Because he was in the NFL, and he's a figure of some note. Play in
the NFL too.
Who?
Brendan Schaub.
Yeah, and if he were still fighting, they'd probably go out of their way. I don't know. Did Schaub actually play in the NFL?
I believe he did.
I know they've always said he did, but
Mitrione definitely did.
I know Mitrione did. Hang on, I want to look up Schaub.
He was signed to the Buffalo Bills practice squad.
Okay, so no, he didn't.
Okay, so he didn't actually. Okay, I thought he was. in the NFL. But Mitrione did play.
Yeah, Mitrione actually I think he had a little bit of playing
Well,
time. Yeah,
like, Mitrione wasn't, pushed that hard as a former NFL guy, really.
he also was not, and again, look, Greg Hardy, I'm not saying best best footballer ever, not even close, but he actually had, again, a bit of notoriety as a good player. Mitrione was a guy who washed out after half a season. Schaub played on the practice team for the Bills during preseason. Didn't even make it the regular season. He played in the Arena Football League for a bit.
Even knowing he played for the Cowboys, I still don't see why he's deserving of being on the main card yet.
He's not, but they're going to do it anyway.
I'm not saying don't let him fight. That's not. I'm just saying he's getting more attention than he's worth right now. Whatever.
That's fair. He's fighting Ben Sassoli, who I imagine is just a heavy bag.
Let's see. According to SureDog, he is 7-2, fought on the Contender Series to a no contest due to an eye poke. I did not see this fight, so I don't know who eye poked to. But
he is from New Zealand. No, Australia, sorry. The extra star means Australia. His picture on Tapology is of him weighing in, having drawn abs on himself with marker. I mean, look, I'm sure Strongbad approves, but...
I mean, so...
He was on the... He was...
Hardy won his last fight, so there's that. His last two. He beat Juan Adams in 45 seconds. Do you know who Juan Adams is?
I do. Juan, the Kraken Adams. He's had like three or four fights in the UFC. Again, this is a setup for Greg Hardy for reasons that remain nebulous. Look, put Greg Hardy in there with anyone who knows anything about what they're doing, and they're going to kill him.
I'm picking Ben Sassoli.
I can't in good conscience do that at this point. If you're asking where my emotions lie, sure, I will not root for Greg Hardy.
What about a DQ finish?
He already has a DQ finish.
Well, what about another one?
He almost had one of those in one of his other fights. It was hilarious.
All right.
All right. Lightweight, Joe Lozon coming out of a brief retirement.
I mean, I love Joe Lozon. I don't know, but we'll see.
He's fighting Jonathan Pierce.
When was Joe's last?
He got obliterated by Chris Gritzmacher.
That was in April of last year. I don't know if this is a good idea. I hope he's not in bad financial straits. But we'll see.
Jonathan Pierce is on a 5-fight winning streak, including a win on the Contender Series earlier this year. That's kind of what's precipitating this. I can't pick Joe Lozon at this point. I just can't. Lozon has his name on some records and was a reliably engaging fighter, but
it happens to every fighter at some point.
Yeah.
Joe Lozon in his time was a remarkably entertaining fighter.
He's been in a couple of fights that I still loved. I mean, that first fight with him and Jim Miller is a personal favorite.
Mainstay UFC fighter, but I mean, it's just...
He might still have the most finishes in UFC lightweight history.
This isn't a... What do I want to say here? This is a tough sport. This sport will always get you in the end. You know what I mean?
This is a brutal, unforgiving sport, and I think Lozon's time has passed.
You're fighting against the clock more than anything, but we'll see.
Yeah. Women's flyweight, we have Macy Barber fighting Jillian Robertson. This is a step up for Barber, but
okay,
I think she's going to win. Robertson has some good grappling, but her striking's very, very limited. Her wrestling is, again, not great. So I've got Barber here. The UFC really does seem to want to strap a rocket to her, so...
Damn it, the Yankees just scored a home run. They're up 2-1 now. Damn it. Ugh.
It's the pinstripes.
I'm not happy right now.
All right, at middleweight, Deron Winn, in his second fight in the UFC, will fight Darren Stewart. I'm really struggling to find a reason to pick Darren Stewart. His UFC record is like 3-4, 1 no contest. Yeah.
Won his last fight though.
He beat Bevon Lewis. That is true. I got Win here. I mean, I need a Darren Stewart is not all that great, and Deron Winn maybe still a little bit on the inexperienced side, but has a style that has also troubled Stewart consistently. Let's see something real fast. Yeah, all right. As for the rest of that's the main card. As for the prelims, Charles Rosa will fight Manny Bermudez. That's not a terrible fight, actually. Bermudez is decent, and Rosa has had a couple of good fights. Probably go with Rosa there. A women's flyweight again, Molly McCann will fight Diana Belbita. No, I am not pronouncing that correctly. Is she Romanian? Yes, sir. So that has a very different pronunciation that I am not going to try to attempt off the top of my head. I'm just going to go with Belbita, and I will be corrected when someone who knows how to pronounce it better than I do does. She's on a 4-fight winning streak at the moment, coming into her debut. McCann has gone, I think, 2-1 in the UFC. Yeah, lost her debut, won her next 2. Probably go with McCann there. Kyle Botniak will fight Sean Woodson. Boy, they are really just shoehorning all the Boston guys in here, aren't they? Botniak 8-4. Jeez, his only UFC wins are a split decision over Enrique Barzola and a win over Brandon Davis. Woodson is 6-0, making his debut. Scored a flying knee knockout on the Contender Series for whatever value you want to give that. I'm going to go with Botniak, but I am not sold on that one. Randy Costa will fight Boston Salmon. Costa 4-1. Lost to Brandon Davis in his debut, which means I'm probably going to go with Salmon, who is 6-2. And lost his debut as well to Khalid Taha. Taha's actually not a bad fighter, though. Yeah, going to go with Salmon. Sean Brady will fight Court McGee. Kind of surprised the UFC still has employed Court McGee. I mean, I like the guy. I actually think I scored the Diego Lima fight in his favor. But he's just like 2-3 in his last 5, and it probably gets a little bit worse if we keep going back. I'm a little surprised he's still on the roster, and that's not because I dislike him. Anyway, Sean Brady is 10-0, making his UFC debut. Sentimentally, I will pick Court McGee. At heavyweight, Daniel Spitz will fight Tanner Boser. Spitz 6-2. He's fought in the UFC. Yeah, he lost to Mark Godbeer, beat Anthony Hamilton, then lost to Walt Harris. Bozier, I believe, is making his UFC debut. Yeah. I'll go with Spitz there. And Kevin Holland will fight Brendan Allen. Kevin Holland, 16-4. He's had 2 fights in the UFC. He's had several fights in the UFC. Jeez, okay. Lost his debut to Thiago Santos. Oh, I remember this guy now. Beat John Phillips, beat Gerald Mearshart. I thought that was slightly dubious. Beat Alessio Di Chirico. Whereas Allen is 12-3, making his debut. I'll probably go with Kevin Holland, but he's, a relatively flawed fighter in many respects that could potentially be. And Holland's taken the fight on short notice, too. Allen was supposed to fight Eric Spicely. That is a radically different style of fighter. All right, so Jeff, what do you want to? Anything stick out to you from that group of fights?
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, again, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of news this last week, but I figure this is as good a place to start as any. We talked last week about former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez moving on to the greener pastures of professional wrestling. This week it was made more official. He apparently has signed a multi-year deal with World Wrestling Entertainment. We talked last week that he had informed the UFC was going to withdraw from the USADA testing pool. Now he's actually signed with a wrestling promotion and is booked officially to battle Brock Lesnar for the WWE Universal title at, as Larry Zonka calls it, Sweet Saudi Blood Money 3. 3 or 4, whatever the next Crown Jewel event is. Also on that same card, boxer Tyson Fury will have a match with Braun Strowman for reasons.
Tyson Fury, man. Good for him. Get that paper.
There's no way he's making as much from WWE as he does boxing. They're not going to pay him that. Then again, if they're able to funnel some of that Saudi Arabian money into him, he might.
I mean, you don't think he's getting a good payday off of this?
He is. I suppose I should rephrase. I suppose I should rephrase.
A worked wrestling match. I mean, for him, that's got to be an easy payday. Plus, he'll get treated, like royalty overseas.
Well, he is the Gypsy King.
Well, arguably, it's an easier payday than a boxing fight.
It is certainly an easier payday than the most lucrative boxing fights he could take. So anyway, Cain to WWE officially. I won't say gone forever from MMA, but given his injury history, given his age,
still has a bad knee.
Yep. I imagine he's probably done with MMA at least for a few years.
I think it's probably for the best.
I mean, again, we're talking about a guy who was, in many respects, absolutely one of the best ever. Just unfortunately, never became champion, has successful title defenses under his belt, but just between injuries and timing and just never. Yeah, I heard this mentioned. I think it was Chuck Mindenhall. If you and I were both watching when he beat Brock Lesnar to become heavyweight champion,
I thought he was never losing that belt.
And not only that, but that was in Anaheim, if memory serves. And the reaction he got for winning that fight was insane. That place went nuts for him. If you watched his run up to the title, you thought he was going to hold the belt forever. And you thought, and not only hold it based on skill, but you thought this guy has the real opportunity to kind of bust open some doors for the sport in various parts of Latin America. For huge other markets that have just, and not just geographic markets, but demographic markets that just have never really gravitated to the sport just yet. You thought this was the guy. This is a heavyweight who puts on exciting fights, who appeals to a demographic and a geographical location we really want to get into. And he looks unstoppable. Like, that guy looked like a one in a million fighter. And to be fair, he probably still is.
You want to know what's crazy? Cain was the betting underdog against Lesnar.
That was the dumbest thing.
Sure.
I mean, I don't have anything against Brock, and I think if you rewatch that fight, prior to Brock getting clipped with that left hook and then breakdancing across the cage, he wasn't doing badly. But that was just such a terrible matchup for him that Cain should not have been the underdog in that fight.
I agree.
So, again, we'll see Velasquez and Lesnar at Crown Jewel, and can I just say the fact that they have Rey Mysterio trying to be Cain's mouthpiece is hilarious to me, because Rey's not exactly a great promo to begin with.
Apparently he's Dominic's godfather or something.
In kayfabe, sure.
I mean, Cain is 37. Dominic Mysterio is how old?
Early 20s, maybe a teenager. I'd have to double check. Probably mid-teens, mid to late teens. I mean, if Brock's throwing him around like he is, he might at least be of legal age.
Let me think. I don't know. He just doesn't seem... I mean, Dominic seems too old to be like the godson of Cain, but whatever. So he's like a friend of the family. I'd buy that.
So anyway, there's that. All right, the other...
Cain, you know, I think this is probably for the best for him to kind of move on. If he's going to be pro wrestling, I don't think you need him on a full-time like schedule. I think just give him a similar Brock Lesnar schedule, and I think he'll be all right.
Yeah, you probably want to give him something slightly more than Brock, but less than, the regular guys. Because he's going to be doing a lot of learning on the job as well, and so you don't want to, have him too much. You don't want to have him on the shelf too much if he's still learning.
Develop his wrestling persona, because he's not like, he's a very intense fighter, but can he translate that over into WWE?
Yeah, that's kind of a rough thing. That's the question. I wouldn't say it's a rough thing, but because there have been plenty of guys who have not been great talkers whose just pure presence has gotten them over. So,
okay.
I will say, Paul Heyman did a tremendous job of putting Cain Velasquez over on the most recent SmackDown. Because Paul Heyman is still one of the best.
I just wish the title wasn't involved because
it does kind of telegraph the finish, doesn't it?
Well, it's more pro wrestling to me, but it's just sort of Lesnar's squashing Kofi in 8 seconds. I thought was garbage, but that's a whole other issue. And I mean, I'm not going to be watching the event anyway, so
in all likelihood, I won't either. But I can't wait for this time next year when Daniel Cormier debuts and we get the AKA tag team.
Quite frankly, I'm surprised they haven't tried something with Cormier sooner because he's, more of a personality, and I never even knew Cain was a wrestling fan. I've known Cormier has been a huge WWE pro wrestling fan for years. So, I mean, why would you not want to create some synergy with him and have him on kickoff shows or whatever? But
because I imagine, if I had to guess, his broadcasting deal with ESPN prohibits him from appearing on Fox in that capacity.
Yeah, but I mean, even before, when the UFC had a Fox deal.
Well, then they didn't have WWE.
I'm sure he could have done something.
Again, once he's done, after he fights Stipe again and win, lose, or draw, if that's his last fight, and however much you think he's telling the truth about that is entirely up to you. But I imagine, again, about this time next year, probably he's debuting and he's going to help save Cain's bacon from a situation, and we'll get those two as a tag team kind of scenario.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, me neither. All right, moving on. This is a little bit of news.
Yeah.
A fight for UFC 245, which is a darn good pay-per-view thus far, between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Robbie Lawler is off. Ponzinibbio fell out, I believe, due to injury, but don't quote me on that.
Bad luck. Hasn't he had like a string of injuries lately?
It's not so much a string as they tend to crop up at just bad times for him.
Like, it just seems like Ponzinibbio is getting hurt or injured quite a bit. Whenever he gets some... He hasn't fought... Alright, so his last fight was November. Because he's on a hell of a win streak, and it just seems like...
It really is.
It just seems like injuries are always hurting his momentum.
Yeah, this was going to be a big opportunity for him, and a fight that, frankly, I was going to favor him to win. So Lawler needs a new opponent. A few people have...
Fight Usman.
Yeah, he was. There was that time he was going to fight Usman. He had a couple of big opportunities fall through.
That's a good fight. That's a good fight. It's really too bad.
Yeah. A few people have put forth their name to replace him. Mike Perry said he'll fight Robbie Lawler, and you know what? Sure, let those two maniacs try to kill each other.
I would have to lean toward Lawler.
Ditto, but at the same time, you know, Lawler's chin isn't what it used to be, and Mike Perry is a
madman.
Heck, Nico Price just got a big knockout. Let's give him that shot. I don't know.
Sure.
There's a lot of ways you can go with that can still make sense and make for entertaining fights. You know, if Leon Edwards is serious about not just getting, because Leon Edwards has great winning streak.
He's due for a fight.
Yeah, and if he wants a high profile win, I know he's ranked above Lawler at this point, and in fairness, he should be. But if you get on 245, which is going to be a big pay-per-view, and you beat Robbie Lawler on the main card, might generate a little bit more momentum for you than you've got right now.
The good news there is that fight hasn't happened yet, because Edwards beat Dos Anjos, and then Dos Anjos beat Lawler, so you can't really, probably don't want to do those rematches just yet. So, interesting.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm sure they'll come up with something. Or he won't fight on the card, in which case, you know what? Fair play. But that's all I've got. All right. Anything else that kind of comes to your mind, Jeff, about news from the week? Because it's been a pretty slow week, I think.
It was really that Joanna thing that was kind of, something on MMA fighting on Thiago Alves exploring free agency after UFC on ESPN 7. Said he will probably retire in 2020. So
it's overdue for him in that respect.
Signed by Bellator.
Almost certainly.
He's only 36, so he could have a whole career in Bellator, really, if he wants.
At welterweight, he gets killed by Douglas Lima, but sure.
Also on MMA fighting, Cody Garbrandt wants to fight again by March. We'll see. We'll see if he can mount a comeback. They're having a couple bad knockout losses.
He almost needs an overhaul.
He really needs to turn it around, but it's not unheard of.
No, it's not. All right. Twitter says nothing new, so let's go ahead and.
We've been talking to MMA fighting about George Masvidal versus Nate Diaz. You've got 20 losses. You're not a bad mother effer. Let's be honest, on the promotional side, I think they dropped the ball in getting my fight done because that was the fight that should be at Madison Square Garden. They dropped the ball getting that fight done, so they have to create something to sell a fight. Let's be honest, these two guys have over 20 losses combined. 20 losses. How can you call yourself a BMF and you've got 20 losses? A bad mother effer alive is a guy no one can touch. You've got 20 losses. Sit your ass down. You're not a bad mother effer. No. He does not think very highly of of the BMF title fight.
Well,
Robert,
I understand his position. Let me be clear. I'm not saying I'm not advocating for it, but you're the champion of your division. He is. Mm-hmm. He's not lost in the UFC at all.
Right.
He's not lost a round in the UFC at all. And he's got a title fight scheduled for, the end of the year against the most deserving contender that they have. I understand him trying to say, no, nuts to that.
Yeah, he hadn't been 5 for years, making 5 all these, right.
Okay, look, I appreciate the Nate Diaz impression.
5 years, 5 all these,
Look, again, he's trying to get some hype around his fight. I get it.
Wrestling now, huh?
And look, again, the winner of that, if the winner of Masvidal and Diaz wants the next title fight at welterweight, they're going to get it. So he's trying to look forward, assuming he beats Covington.
What upset
and get a little hype on him.
with Usman is the guy asking him questions never asked him about the ESPN report saying the UFC threatened to strip him of the title. I want to know what was up there.
Even if it was true, I doubt. Again, like, I don't know that he'd give a straight answer.
ESPN reported it. I mean, so I want.
And look, the UFC has threatened to strip champions in the past if they don't acquiesce to their will. It's a negotiation tactic that's been documented.
I want to know how it was presented to him and how that worked out. Because if ESPN reported it and they did not pull it out of nowhere, I would like to know where the origin of that. I don't think that's unreasonable.
No, I would be very curious to know about the details of that as well. You'd have to ask him.
All right, well, that's about it for right now.
Alrighty then. Yeah, that's all I've got too. So, what would you like to plug, Jeff? What do you got coming up?
Anyone who's a fan of Korean filmmaker Bong Joon-ho, and if you like Snowpiercer, his latest film Parasite, which won the Palme d'Or of the Cannes Film Festival. One of, I think, the best films of the year is Parasite. Check out my review of that. Also, check out my review of the #1 movie in America yet again, Joker. My review of the really, truly awful Will Smith film directed by Ang Lee, Gemini Man. I was at the Impact Wrestling Media Day at Access TV Studios, and we've got some interviews that are going to be coming up, hopefully throughout the week or over the next couple weeks with some of the Impact Wrestling talent. And then also my next reviews will be doing Zombieland 2, Maleficent 2, and there was one other one I have coming up. Zombieland 2, Maleficent 2. Oh, Terminator Dark. Oh God, Terminator.
You've started to sound like me when talking about the movies you have to review.
God, it's another Terminator freaking sequel. They're starting over again, and they're trying to. I just wish this franchise would die. To me, there was a time you could have made a third Terminator movie. That time is long past. A legit third Terminator movie. And this still isn't it. So, sorry.
Have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't. I'm going to be seeing it next... When is it? I'm seeing it this... I believe sometime this week.
Okay.
So, here we go. So no, a week from tomorrow is when I'm saying it. At least it's close.
Yeah, there's that.
And you know what? Look. Sometimes I can get surprised. I'm not expecting it here. I mean, have you seen the other Terminator sequels?
I've seen all of them, yeah. I've reviewed a few of them, and
here.
I have a hard time imagining it being worse than Genesis, because Genesis was just the worst thing I'd ever seen for a while. Which is also... I actually don't know how I'd rate Genesis versus the Christian Bale one.
Just saying not worse than Genesis is not like some sort of high watermark of quality.
It's not. It's really not.
Yeah. That's all I have for plugs this week.
As for myself, I got together with Mark Radulich and Alexis Haina on Tuesday, and we reviewed Joker. It's about a 3-hour-long discussion of that movie, so strap in if you're going to listen.
Did you like Joker?
By and large,
okay.
To kind of summarize my position, the entire movie is designed to hinge around Joaquin Phoenix's performance, and his performance is spectacular. But it doesn't really do anything other than provide a vehicle for Joaquin Phoenix to act. There's some decent cinematography that went into it, but there's nothing else about that movie that is interesting, much less remarkable, apart from his performance.
I agree. Pretty much agree with that. I think that's pretty spot on.
I mean, even other character pieces like There Will Be Blood at least had like Paul Dano doing a bang up job in his supporting role. You know, this one just nothing apart from Phoenix. Anyway, we get the whole. So there's our discussion of that and loosely related subjects. I got together kind of impromptu with Mark, and we did some alternate commentary watch along stuff for the boxing match on Saturday evening. Alexander Usyk's heavyweight debut against Chaz Witherspoon after Tyrone Spong failed a drug test. How do you fail a drug test in boxing, man? That's laughable. Then again, drug testing being what it is, who knows? So we have some watch-along stuff for that. If you're so inclined, again, Mark and I had a good time talking. We, watched the fight and talked. That's kind of how that goes. I don't think there's a Damn You Hollywood this week. We'll be back over the next few weeks with all the movies Jeff mentioned, actually. Maleficent, Terminator, Zombieland. So you can tune in for those if you're a fan of Damn You Hollywood. And I'm not on any of the TV parties, so we'll be back here next. So again, Friday evening, UFC on ESPN 6. Hope you'll all tune in for my coverage of that in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. We'll be back here next week to review that event. And that'll be the 18th. Yeah, we'll be previewing the UFC's return to Singapore for UFC on ESPN Plus 20, Maia versus Askren. Okay, that's a card, I suppose. Yeah, there's some decent stuff there. Muslim Salikov and Loriana Staropoli is going to be that has some knockdown drag out potential. Enrique Barzola and Movsar Evloev might be good. Okay, there's a few things. Oh, Cyril Gane's fighting. Okay. One of the few heavyweights I won't actively groan when I hear is fighting. And we'll have a full preview of that event next week. Hope you all be back for that. Until then, thank you again for listening. Thank you for interacting with the product. Thank you for sharing us with your friends if you have any that you think are interested. See you next time again. Until then, on behalf of Jeff, I am Robert. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.